Hi guys, we're in the EPI shop today. Today we're going to show you how to do a clutch install on the 2014 and 2015 900 Rangers and Ranger Cruise. They got a new style clutch on them compared to the 13s. So we'll kind of run through that with you and show how it works. Alright, to start off in this project, basically got to lift up the box, tilt that all the way up and out of your way. Then you have to get in here and take off a couple different things. The easiest way to get to the clutch cover is remove the air box. So there's a couple bolts here, here, and here. While you're up there, there's a vent line. You just gotta loosen that up. We've loosened this up already, kind of speed up for the video. And then these two lines here, you have to loosen and remove from the air box. So we'll just pop those off real quick. Once you get those all off, the air box just kind of falls right out of there. Once you get the air box out of the way, then the best thing you want to do, or the next thing you want to do, is remove this greaser. Always take a clean rag and wipe it up clean, because there can be grease there around these bushings here. You don't want any of that to get on the clutches or on the belt when you're installing and removing and stuff like that. So clean that up real good. It takes a 3/8 wrench. You just turn a little bit, and they usually come out pretty easy. Set that aside. The next thing you want to do is there's 8 bolts holding this clutch cover in. You can kind of see the different spots. It's an 8mm on this particular machine. You just remove them. We've taken them out already except for this one. Just back them out. Once you get that off, the clutch cover's going to kind of bump right where that greaser was, and you got to kind of wiggle around and move around. If it's just came in from the cold and stuff like that, it's going to be a little colder and stiffer to get on and off, but it will come out of there. But you just pop it on and off like that. That's going to reveal your clutches. This is going to be your primary clutch on your motor, sometimes called the drive clutch. This will be the secondary clutch or the driven clutch on the transmission. And here's your drive belt. And one thing we want to show you before we take anything apart on here, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but you want to put it in here so you can read the writing on there from left to right. There it says Polaris. Here's the OE number. The main reason you want to do that is you want to take track of, or keep track of how the belt's on there, so when you put it back on, if you're going to reuse that same belt, that it goes on the same direction. They should always go on so you can read them left to right. If for some reason yours is on there backwards, just make sure if you put that same belt on that it goes on backwards again. Alright, so on this machine, if you're changing both things over, I like to take off the secondary clutch first, that way you don't have to fight the belt so much. The big thing to realize on the secondary clutch is there's an X right here. I think you can see that in the video. And what I always like to do is I like to put an X on the outside of the clutch here and matching right behind it on the other sheave on the back. I'll show you why in a second, because these are matched up to go. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video or not, but once we get it off, you'll be able to see a little bit better. This clutch is a little bit harder to hold and to get the bolt off. So usually the easiest way is an impact. It's not always the best way, but that's the easy way to back it off. Once you get that off, make sure you just keep track of the nut or the bolt and the washers on there. And you just pull this half towards you. Now when you pull this off, you got to be careful. There's a washer in here, and it could fall off at any time when you pull it out. But here's the one half of your clutch. And then remember, here's the X that we showed you. We'll set this off to the side. You can remove your belt out of here. And then this is the washer you always got to watch for, because it could come off. The easy way is just pull the clutch out towards you and then push it back on. You can grab it. I always just set it in the clutch. That way you remember to put it back on. Excuse me. What you'll see here is right here there's an X on that helix too. This is the cut-in part of the helix on this style clutch. You can't change it. It's part of the actual clutch itself. But this is an alignment mark for you. So just keep track of that X. And, you know, if it's easier for you. I don't mind marking in a couple different spots, a couple different ways. That way if you clean the clutch, you don't wipe them off and stuff. So, but you'll see that once that comes off. On this machine, there's only one washer here. We've seen on other machines there could be up to 2 or 3, so it could vary. Just be careful of that. And once you pull it off, here's the back side of the clutch. Again, there's an X here too. So worst comes to worst, if you forget to mark this or you don't see this, there is an X here too. So this is how you normally pull off the primary clutch off the motor. It's actually pressed on the crankshaft, so once you remove this center bolt, it won't come off. You got to use an actual clutch puller to get it off. Best way to do it is if you got a really big screwdriver or a small bar like this, stick it through, and you want to go through, so when you're turning on things, it's going to hit this outside of the towers. It's kind of hard to see, but right in here, if you're in between this area where it's machined and it's shiny there, your clutch moves up and down. If you damage that area, you'll wreck the plastic buttons that slide up and down in there. So just make sure you're always on the outside edge of the clutch, on both sides where the bar's going through. And then you just want to tighten it up. Wherever your bar is, make sure you're not going to damage a brake line or any electrical wires or anything like that. Usually you can find a piece of the frame or the skid plate that it'll rest on. And it's just a matter of loosening it up. They're cranked on there. These are about 95 foot-pounds, so they got some force behind them. So you just unthread that. Again, just make sure you keep track of these washers so you don't lose those. Then you want to use a primary clutch puller. This is the EPI puller, the PCP8. Works on all the 900 and 1000s like that. But basically it just threads in like a bolt, and what it'll do is it'll tighten up against the crankshaft. As you tighten it, you got to keep the clutch from rotating the opposite direction now, and then it'll pull the clutch off. So as we thread this in, we'll do that, and then this clutch is going to spin the other way now, so we just got to brace it against the frame or something on here so it doesn't move. And sometimes this will pop off real nice and easy. Other times it can be pretty hard. Get this down in there. And what you do is just tighten it up until it goes. It sounds pretty violent. Most of that was just the bar falling on the ground, but it'll make a little pop. Sometimes it just slides that off nice and easy. If you get to the point where it's really stuck on there and you're really cranking on it and it won't come off, when you got tension on it, if you just hit it on the end of the puller dead on straight with a hammer, just give it a little love tap, nothing hard, that normally vibrate enough and pop the clutch off. Once that's loose, you can kind of move the clutch back and forth like that. And then you just pull it off. You see where the clutch puller is sticking through here. But then it's a matter of just taking it over the bench and taking it apart. So here's the back of your secondary clutch. Basically what you want to do is just loosen these up. They're a little tight in there. So before I put them in a tool or anything like that, I just like to crack them loose. Just give them a turn or two, nothing crazy. This is a 30 Torx on here. You don't want to take them all the way out because this has got spring tension on it. So they're all loose now. This is the clutch compression tool, the CCT510 from EPI. Basically we put it in the vise here. You slide the clutch down in there, or over it, and then slide the adapter and the collar on. Tighten it down. Now when you tighten it down, you don't want to crank on it because this is a thin metal plate, so you can bend that. You just want to get it enough so there's just a little bit of tension on there so you can loosen up the screws. Again, just light tension. And then once you got that done, I don't normally like using a Torx on these because you can strip them out pretty easy, but if they're turning free and they're turning them, you can do it. And to speed up for the video, we'll show it to you. Just remove all the screws. Once they're out, just back this off. Again, just remember it's spring loaded, so there's tension on there. once you got it up far enough, just take that out. Just set it off to the side, and that'll expose your spring in there. Once you got your spring out of there, what I like to do then is just take everything apart, blow it out real good. This one's pretty new, so there's not a whole lot of dirt and dust in here, but you'll usually see dirt and dust in there in all these. Then, especially where the belt rides up and down, what you want to do is just take like a Scotch-Brite or a real light emery cloth, real light sandpaper, and just start at the outside and just go back and forth like this all the way around, and that'll take off any belt glazing. So if you got a lot of time or miles on it, or if this really seems shiny, just go like that all the way around. Then take some a clean rag. Let me set this down. Some clean rag with a brake cleaner, and then just wipe it down. This one's fairly clean, so you're not going to see much. But this is where I'm telling you, if you accidentally, you might wipe off your X on your mark. So that's why I got one here, and then also there's the one on the back side. So just kind of pay attention to that, or to watch for that. And then do obviously the same thing to the other half of the clutch. Once you got that part done, to put it all back together, it's pretty much the same process. You just reverse it. What you want to do is set your spring in there. You got to kind of watch. I don't know if the camera can see this or not. It's not a really good circle all the way around in there, so different springs will fit a little bit different. So what I like to do is just make sure the spring is seated flat. Some springs will vary on the ends of them, so it's not getting caught up or caught off one way or another. The spring sits as straight as it can in there. And then set the cup on. And this will move around a little bit. It's got a little slot built into it. That's fine as long as you're not bending it when you're pushing down on it. And again, just slowly tighten this down. You don't want to put a big impact on it or anything to damage anything. And if you don't have one of these tools, you can get it done with a shop press or something like that, as long as you got enough room to work on it. But this makes it nice and safe and easy for one person to do it. Once you get about almost down there, you'll notice that the holes don't always line up. You have to kind of move it around and float it around a little bit. And what I like to do is just like to get just get one or two of the bolts started in there, and then before I screw any of them down tight, I get all of them started. Well, usually once you get one in there, you can pivot around. I don't know if the camera can see that, but these holes are half off now. And if you don't crank it down tight, it's easier to move around. But then you can kind of get it to move, and then put your bolt in. I don't know if you can see that with my hand in the way or not, but sometimes it takes a little bit more time and patience. Usually once you get two of them in there, that lines them up pretty good to get the rest of them in there. It's just a matter of tightening these down. These don't come with blue Loctite on them. A lot of times when I'm done, I like to put blue Loctite on them. This clutch is going to come apart again here in a few minutes, so we're not on this one. But you don't want to use red or green. If you do anything, just put a blue on there so it comes off. And then just I always tighten these by hand. It's pretty easy to strip them out otherwise. And then if it's not cranked all the way down, just give it a little bit more turn. Again, be careful you're not bending this metal plate. And then once you tighten these all up, they don't have to be super cranked on hard or nothing. There. And It's just a matter of backing this off. You done, your springs installed, your clutch, this part of the clutch is done. Alright, so now we'll tear apart the primary clutch. What you always want to do before you take any of the clutches apart is put an X on them. There's an X here from the factory, but I always like just to make a marker on it and just mark it in a couple spots. That way if you don't clean it, or you won't wipe it off when you clean it and stuff, that way you know that this cover plate's going back on the right way. So basically what we do is we got our CCT 510 compression tool in here again. Going to slide this down on here carefully. Once that's down in there, slide this on. And you don't have to crank it down real far, you just enough to move it a little bit and take some of the tension, or push the spring down just a little bit. Once you do that, you can remove these bolts. So as you see, once those bolts are loose, it'll let you move it up and down like that, as long as you got something holding the spring. Just remove these out. And then back this off. If you're doing this by hand, some springs are going to be stronger than others, so you just got to be careful. If you don't have this tool, I'll show you once you get this cover off here, you can damage this bushing by taking those bolts off. So what you want to do, let me get this out of here. Is there's a little bushing in here, and what can happen is that normally wears, during normal use. But what will happen is if you're trying to take this off and you take off just these bolts and this one's staying in, you'll caulk that bushing in there and it can damage it. Same thing when you're putting it back together. So you want to be able to, if you don't have a tool to do it, you need somebody there to help hold it, push it down. So when you take off the bolts, it comes up nice and even and square. So you don't do any damage there. But once you remove this, your spring will be sitting in here. So you set that offside, remove the spring. And then now is a good time to clean your clutches, just like on the secondary clutch. You can pull it back out. With the springs off, you can move this in and out. And you want to just make sure, again, Scotch-Brite, start on the outside, go towards the inside, go like that all the way around on both sides. Take an air hose, blow it out real good, wipe it down with some brake cleaner. The other thing you got to check is, I don't know if you can see that spinning in there, but this is your bearing on your primary clutch, and it's pretty common on Polarises for these to start to stick and hang up, especially if you get mud or water in there. That'll really bind them up, and that causes a lot of belt issues and clutch issues. So just make sure that's turning free. It doesn't have to spin free real quick, but it's got to move freely. So then slide this back in here and show you how to remove the weights. It's just an Allen wrench on one side, and then you'll see the 3/8 wrench or a nut on the other side. Just unthread that. This is your stock weight in there. We're just going to pull that out, remove that one. We're going to put the EPI one in. The EPI ones are plated for better finish. They're hardened. They last longer. Plus, they got a bushing in them. So we'll stick that in there. And sometimes you got to wiggle it around and make it get through there. Oops. Basically stick the bolt through the weight and tighten up the nut. There you go. And just make sure it moves freely on there. If it's not, try to clean the weight pin. If your weight pin's old or rusted or corroded up, you can take your weight pin and slide it through there. That'll loosen things up in there too. It'll be a little tight when it's brand new, but once you get some miles on it, it should free up. So, and just repeat that same process for the other 3 weights, or the other 2 weights, and then we'll show you how to put it back together. Alright, so then to install your spring, just set your spring in there, make sure it seats flat on both ends in there. Sometimes they'll fit a little snug, but if you push down on them, they'll seat in. Same thing on this cover plate here. If you are cleaning your clutches, always just use a dry paper towel on this bushing. You don't want to wipe it down with brake cleaner. That can damage the bushing. But other than that, it's just a matter of setting that down on there. Again, line up your X's where we did here. And you just want to carefully tighten this up so you don't damage that bushing. Just crank this down. And once you get down so far, that's usually pretty good, because you can actually pick up on this if you want and bring that up. Again, make sure you always double check your alignment. It's just a matter of installing these bolts. Again, you're not wrapping on these really hard with an impact or anything, because they're going in aluminum. And you want to kind of do it in a crisscross pattern. It's kind of like you're putting on a tire. Once you get them that close, what I normally do is I just tighten them by hand. Once they get out of here, once you get that tightened up and torqued down, it's good to go. So we're going to install the primary clutch on the machine. Before you want to do that, just take a clean rag and wipe this part of the clutch out. Same thing on the taper of the crankshaft. Just wipe it down real good. If it's rusty and stuff, just clean it up. You don't want to machine down on anything, but just clean it up. That'll aid you in taking it off next time. But basically, just grab the clutch, put it on there, as nice as square as you can. Just kind of give it a little push, and then start throwing your bolt in. This one's going to be torqued on to 95 foot-pounds. Just like when we're removing it, we're going to have to use that small bar in there. Again, careful where you put it through so you don't damage you know, the towers, or where the weights go up and down in there. Using a little bit longer extension just to give you guys a better view here. So it's torqued to 95 foot-pounds. Once you got that on there, primary clutch is pretty much done, and then it's just a matter of getting your secondary clutch on, which this is where we change the spring on. That part goes on first. Again, keep track. There's an X here. I put an X on it so you can kind of see it a little bit better. That'll give you an alignment mark for on your other half here. We'll slide this part on first. Sometimes it kind of binds up and you might have to kind of run it back and forth a little bit, but there it slid on pretty good. Sometimes you got to wiggle it a little bit and it'll go, or sometimes you might need to put the machine in gear to do that. Then the next step on this machine is put the belt on. Again, we're going to set it so this one's the Polaris belt on here, so you can read the numbers from left to right, and make sure you don't flip that around. If your machine's really dirty, muddy, and greasy, make sure that the belt isn't getting dirty at all, or the clutch is greasy or anything like that when you're installing them here. Once you get that part on, this little gold washer goes in the middle here. Again, there could be multiples of those. And then on your secondary clutch, these little rollers here are going to slide in these slots. So they'll slide in that slot there. Right here is the X mark. So you want to kind of line up the X here. So you're going to kind of hold those in place, and that gives you a pretty good guideline on where it's got to go. And it's not going to slide on all the way right away, because what you have to do is, as you get it on there, we might have to put this in another gear, but you have to wiggle this belt back and forth, and that'll allow this clutch to go on farther. You can kind of tell how far you are here by that, and you wiggle it back and forth, and the more you do that, the tighter you go. And then once you get close, you can put your bolt in, and then this gets torqued to 38 foot-pounds. But usually what happens is, I'll show you with an impact, or I'll show you real quick here. You just don't want to impact it on, because you can actually pinch the belt in between the clutch sheaths and it might not move. It might take a little bit longer because it's not threading in real easy. And once you get to this point, you'll feel as it tightens up a little bit, but it's actually forcing that clutch. It's pinching that belt in that clutch, and it'll kind of work that belt out and tighten up the belt at the same time. So if you just impact it on there, you take a chance of doing that. What you can do is also, to help things out, you put the clutch or the machine in neutral. That allows this clutch to free spin and reset, and you can kind of see where the belt will be in and out of the clutch, and it should reset itself. Again, as you tighten it up, it's going to go better. And just give it a couple turns and turn the clutch a little bit, and then you'll finally feel it bottom out. Once you get to that point, you got to torque it to 38 foot-pounds. So if you can hold it in place and torque it, grab the torque wrench, torque it down. Sometimes it takes two people to kind of hold it, or if you got a rubber strap wrench, you can do that. So the next step's going to be install your clutch cover. Just make sure there should be a foam gasket in here. It's probably going to be hard to see in the video. Usually 99% of the time you can replace that or just reuse it without replacing it. If it's been damaged or got cut up or something, then you want to replace that. And it's just a matter, it kind of pops in place here. It kind of binds up here and up here on the air box lines, but it'll just kind of pop in like that. Get it in. And again, these bolts are just going in plastic, so you don't want to super torque them or anything, because they strip out really easy. But that'll hold your clutch cover in place. Just repeat that for the other bolts. Alright, so the last step pretty much is going to be putting your air box back on. You just slide it up through here. And it kind of rests itself in place until you can get a bolt in there. Just buzz those on. The other thing we did is we did install the greaser back on there. Don't forget to do that. Once that's installed, then just remember there's a front vent line up here with a hose clamp on it. You probably won't be able to see it. Install that one. Then you got your big one back here. Might have to loosen up the hose clamps a little bit more than I got them now. But you guys get the picture. Install that one, and then install this one. Once you got that, tighten up clamps, you're pretty much ready to go.